But at least we see from the part of the Russians and the Chinese is very interesting, Danny. Little by little, they're becoming more assertive. It's like what it's those little details that you see for the first time in their official declarations that wow, they never said this before this way, so blunt. For instance, when they early this week they were talking about we support our Arab brothers, especially Palestine. This is enormous in terms of Chinese diplomacy because they are usually very, you know, circumspect. They never affirm something. So, in terms of international politics, only Chinese issues. So you see, we can see that it's changing little by little.
We have Israel bombarding Lebanon, killing hundreds upon hundreds of people, children. There's talk of all-out war. Hezbollah is targeting the intelligence headquarters of Mossad. So this is the first
This is the first one.
first Tel Aviv, first Beirut to Tel Aviv trade-off. What I wanted to ask you, though, Pepe, is given this development, given the fact that now we are looking at not just a long war in West Asia, but one that is continuously escalating into this regional war, how does the multipolar world respond? How do you feel and believe that Russia, China, and BRICS will be coordinating and responding to what will be a generational conflict and war that now is reaching a 1-year point?
Well, the first straightforward response we all hope will come in 4 weeks. October 22 at the start of the BRICS summit in Kazan. The expectations are extremely high, not only here in Moscow, but in major Eurasian capitals as well. Negotiations are frantic. It's extremely complicated because the BRICS have not only to propose to the whole global south, the global majority, their roadmap for next year, the next few years, geoeconomically, geopolitically, and morally as well. And that will include a very strong stance on a genocide in Gaza ongoing and the possibility of a genocide 2.0, because so far, most of the victims in Lebanon have been civilians. So this is extremely serious. And we cannot count on the UN for that anymore. I just before talking to you and all of you, I was writing a column about the absolute that the UN is basically New York is basically a monolith to incompetence and irrelevance nowadays. Apart from 3 or 4 beautiful, lofty interventions during the General Assembly, Erdogan. Pezeshkian, certainly Lavrov. Lavrov, I think, is going to speak on Saturday, Wang Yi, but that's rhetoric. I'm sorry. And what happened this past weekend in New York was beyond any surrealist script. It was the so-called Summit of the Future. And they adopted, theoretically by consensus, a pact for the future with only a few abstentions and a few no's. Most important information of them all. Otherwise, we could go on for hours or so. Who voted against? Russia and Iran. Who abstained? China, among the most important ones. Translation: the 3 most important BRICS rejected the UN's pact for the future. So this is something of transcendental importance, and it has to be analyzed, I would say, in the weeks ahead, even before the BRICS summit in Kazan. Because essentially, these 3 civilizational states, they saw this pact as an anti-BRICS pact, essentially. And obviously, because they diplomatically, they are in close touch all the time, they knew exactly how this thing was organized, how this consensus was built up, who actually redacted this. If you read, go to the UN website and try to read this thing. You're going to have a heart attack, all of you. But it's all there, at least. At least they don't disguise it. And if you read the annexes, it's even worse. So I took the trouble of reading this thing before writing, of course, and it's a nightmare. And guess who wrote it? Big tech and big finance. The so-called redactors of the digitalization process, according to them, were the governments of Germany and Namibia. But this is for show, obviously. The people who actually redacted are the Davos gang, the World Economic Forum. And very few people around the world remember what happened in 2019. An agreement, a direct agreement signed by Guterres and Dr. Evil Klaus Schwab of a partnership between the UN and the World Economic Forum and Davos. So basically, Davos dictates the agenda for the UN. And what we see now, this pact for the future, you can, all of you, I strongly suggest you read it. It's all there. And at least we had a no and a counterpower from the three top BRICS. I said, no, we don't agree with all that. First of all, because we were never consulted. First of all, we were not part of these negotiations. And worse, African diplomats at the UN, for instance, off the record, because they were all scared, this weekend they were saying, look, we voted for this thing. We didn't read anything. We didn't even know what we were voting for. But we voted out of solidarity. What does that mean? That they were either coerced or bribed to vote for the pact. So this, I think this gives to all of you the real state of things at the UN. No matter those beautiful words that Wang Yi or Lavrov are saying, no, the reality is tawdry, is cheap, is absolutely disgusting, and it's a UN completely irrelevant and under control. And that also explains on another vector why they are incapable of really protecting Gaza or protecting Palestine. No, because they know that any resolution at the UN Security Council will be torpedoed by the usual suspects. Not only the US, but UK and France as well. They will torpedo it. So this is reality for all of you. It's ghastly real. And this brings us once again to Kazan in 4 weeks. They'll have to start to try changing the state of affairs. And it's not going to be only through rhetoric. They need a concrete roadmap. So let's see if we have at least the first baby steps, outlined in Kazan. And then we start to have real changes starting 2025. But it's going to be a long and winding road, to say the least.
Yeah. And given this, I mean, I've heard directly from people close to Russia, people close to China. They say that the UN system is just wholly, of course, controlled by the veto, by the top, of course, the so-called top members of the Security Council, aka the United States. So given this, though, because Russia and China, how they differ is that they truly are against what Israel is doing in Lebanon, for example.
Yes.
How do they then navigate this really what is a geopolitical storm that has such wide-ranging impact? How do they navigate this, not just leading into the BRICS summit, but also right now?
True. And right now, we don't see any specific targeted action against what Israel is doing. That's quite worrying. We have the axis of resistance. We have the militias in Iraq now, getting more involved. Sooner or later, we're going to get the Houthis even more involved. Iran, for the moment, is taking a back seat. Pezeshkian is in an extremely complicated position because he has to manage the let's call them the semi-Atlanticists in Iran, who want some sort of accommodation with the collective West. With the Europeans, would be possible. With the US, absolutely forget it. and the hawks, which basically the absolute majority, not only the IRGC, but the hawks in general, and the hawks in the Majlis, the Iranian parliament as well. And at the same time, this new important position of Iran inside the BRICS, where they have to coordinate with the two big powers, essentially, and also with India, because they have excellent bilateral relations, diplomatic relations, and a partnership with India. But it's it's juggling. So the juggling that Pezeshkian has to do, it's in many ways is similar to the juggling that Putin has to do here as well, with the hawks, with infiltrated Atlanticists, with westernizers among the oligarchs, with some very powerful oligarchs who are still connected to the West. So to elaborate a strategy unifying, especially these, let's say, these top four BRICS, let's count India as well, the complexity is absolutely mind-boggling. Before I wrote the column that was published in Monday here in Russia on what the BRICS are discussing on the geoeconomic front, the discussions that I had with people, heads of development funds, people in finance tech, guys from the BRICS Business Council who are actually recommending policy for the BRICS before Kazan, they say, you have no idea how bloody difficult the whole thing is. Internal problems in all of them. And can you imagine coordinating all of them on the same table? And now adding the new members. And adding also a member that is a new member, but it still does not consider itself a new member, Saudi Arabia, which is absolutely crucial. Very good relations with China and Russia. But with Iran, it's still baby steps to have a solid relationship with Iran. And at least we heard this from Saudi Arabia this past few days, finally, from MBS himself. No relationship with Israel as long as this thing goes on and there is no sovereign Palestinian nation. This is already an enormous step, because it goes completely against the rules-based international order and those lunatics in the White House at the moment. But you see, Danny, it's little by little. It's too slow for all of us who are deep into it and following it on an everyday basis. Of course, we get dejected sometimes, and sometimes many times. We all wish why don't they can come up with a consensus solution? No, it's too difficult. It's too difficult. And the fact that these once again, Talmudic psychopathological genocidals, that's the short definition of those people in Tel Aviv, they are entering into another suicidal operation, which is basically killing civilians in Lebanon. That's what they're doing, essentially. They know that militarily, if they launch the so-called ground offensive against Hezbollah, it's going to be a disaster. Everybody knows that. Even the guys from the IDF know that. And they still keep, they double down. They double down all the time. So they're losing a war in Palestine, and now they're choosing to lose a war in Lebanon as well, but killing civilians indiscriminately. And obviously, what we could say, we could basically define them as a Western criminal syndicate. In fact, US, UK, and European vassals, they legitimize all this all the time. Mm-hmm. You see the British media rejoicing at Lebanese being killed, literally, on their front pages.
Right. New York Post with the pager attack, rejoicing.
New York Post, exactly. So it's for all of us who are involved into this fight to build a multinodal, alternative, multipolar world. It's tough. It's very, very tough. And these past 2 weeks, in fact, there are a lot of people here who are starting to frontally disagree with the Russian position in Ukraine. This is very complicated because these people, for instance, they are They are looking at those daily attacks by swarms of drones against infrastructure inside the Russian Federation. You cannot read this in Russian media because this is Ministry of Defense censorship. And a lot of well-informed people here, they strongly disagree with this censorship. They go, no, Russian public opinion has to be informed of what's really happening inside there, not even in Donbass, but inside the Russian Federation as a whole. And so the enemy, in fact, monopolizes the narrative. You see it all over the West, the attacks on ammunition depots, that kind of, but you don't see it in Russia itself. So this is counterproductive, and another example of how Russia still does not understand how to weaponize soft power. It's an ongoing discussion.
Please. No, I wanted to ask, if you've heard of the latest developments, because what I'm with regard to interest in BRICS, because it sounds like what you're saying is that this is a very slow process toward a multipolar world, of course, and a slow process for it to impact such a thing like Israel's absolute U.S.-backed genocidal rampage that's turning regional. But we have news that Afghanistan is very interested now in joining BRICS. The Western media is now very concerned about Pakistan also being interested. We know that the Iranian president and Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, Pezeshkian and Putin, are going to meet at the BRICS summit. Talk about how the strengthening of BRICS in West Asia could, and we can close on this topic, could change the calculus over time.
Wow, this is immensely important, because now we have members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization who want to be part of BRICS. And this will be leading, I would say, midterm to a merge. It's something that we already discussed in some of our podcasts, that is being widely discussed among these Eurasian capitals. Lukashenko himself already said on the record, of course, they have to merge because the objectives are the same. And it's true. And it's especially because the role of the SCO changed this past few years. Now, it's not only a counter-terror, counter-separatism organization like in the beginning, 2001, but it's a geoeconomic integration organization. They're talking about connectivity corridors, for instance. And Afghanistan is absolutely essential for the whole thing. The Russians and the Chinese especially, but to a certain extent, with some reservations, but looking at the big picture, the Iranians and the Indians, they all want to bring Afghanistan inside the SCO to normalize Taliban Afghanistan. And evidently, the next step would be inside BRICS as well. So sooner or later, becoming a member of BRICS and the SCO will be practically the same thing for all these big actors in Eurasia. In the case of Turkey, for instance, they are dying to get into BRICS, but they are already observers at the SCO. So they could get into both simultaneously, in fact, next year. Okay, no, sorry. Something important came up. So from Central Asia to West Asia, these new candidates for BRICS are a big thing. And of course, they are being courted diplomatic by the big guys, of course, because they know how strategic they are. Same thing for the other African candidates. The case of Yemen is very complicated because theoretically, Yemen now has two governments. One is in a bloody five-star hotel in Riyadh, which is recognized by the international community, rules-based international order. The real government is one in Sana'a, in fact. And these are the ones who are trying to do something for the benefit of Yemen. So, a few months ago, they sent two delegations here in Moscow. I met with one of them. It was a fantastic discussion. The problem is they could not be received formally by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and by the Ministry of Agriculture here in Russia, because they are not the official government, you see. So you still need to deal with this kind of things. It gets even more complicated. And they were trying to get basically agricultural agreements to Russia to relieve the famine that's still raging in Yemen. Nobody talks about it in the West anymore, but Yemen still, they are still under some sort of a partial siege by the Saudis. They were bombed by US, UK until a few days ago. Now there's a lull. So they are at war on two different fronts still. And they're still suffering because of this blockade, this economic blockade, So, but at least we see from the part of the Russians and the Chinese is very interesting, Danny. Little by little, they're becoming more assertive. It's like what it's those little details that you see for the first time in their official declarations that, wow, they never said this before this way, so blunt. For instance, when they earlier this week they were talking about we support our Arab brothers, especially Palestine. This is enormous in terms of Chinese diplomacy because they are usually very, circumspect. They never affirm something. So in terms of international politics, only Chinese issues. So you see, we can see that it's changing little by little, but it's extremely complex and it's the whole thing is slow, unfortunately.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.